Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report, and a special daily editorial where we are back with another segment of Shad and Doc Talk Stocks, where we have Shad Marquitz, co-host of the show, sharing some of the fundamental characteristics of a handful of precious metals and energy stocks we are going to be focusing on, and Richard Postma, aka Doc, sharing his technical outlook on these stocks. We're also doing this in video format so you all can follow along on the charts that Doc is looking at and some of the key levels that we will be asking him about. Shad, let's get this underway, starting with the first stock here. Equinox Gold, traded on the NYSE under the symbol EQX. Shad, what are some of the fundamentals that stand out to you?
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, with Equinox Gold, I think a lot of people will know the serial successful Ross Beatty, who has built a number of successful companies and taken them into the point where they either got purchased or merged with another company or sold for a big valuation. In this case, Equinox Gold has 7 gold mines, and they're actually a higher cost producer at this point. But what I see as pivotal for Equinox Gold this year is that they have a large development project, the Greenstone project in Canada, and first gold pour is supposed to be in the first half of 2024. And what it will essentially do is double their production and chop their price down substantially to where they will become a lower cost producer. So it gives them some leverage in the sense of growth in this year, but also reducing cost, hopefully with the backdrop of a rising gold price. And I also like their diversification. They have 4 mines in Brazil. Brazil has been doing better as a jurisdiction in South America. They have 1 mine in Mexico, 2 mines in California, but this Greenstone project will be in Ontario, Canada. And what I also like about the company, one other thing, is that they're deal makers. They have had divested some of their projects in the past. They've sold some mines. They've acquired some of the different companies and mines individually. So they're good deal makers, and I think they'll continue to do well through the sector. So that's why I like Equinox Gold as a growth-oriented gold producer for 2024.
So, Shad, with this Greenstone project where the company is targeting first gold pour in the first half of this year, do you know if they are funded fully to build this thing or if they will need to go through any dilution in the meantime?
I met with them in Beaver Creek, Corey, and the word that I got back from the investor relations department and the management team was that they are funded for construction to be completed at the early part of this year, and they're mostly done with it. And in a world where we've seen cost overruns in other companies like Magino for Argonaut or Cote's IM Gold, that's been a slam against them. And they said they're going to surprise the market by doing it on time and on budget. So we'll see how it goes. But they messaged to me that they should be good to go for this year with what they have in the house currently.
All right, Doc, let's get into the charts here. I have the Equinox Gold daily chart pulled up. It seems like we're trading just in a big range here. What's the chart telling you?
Yeah, what the chart's telling me is that compared to some other stocks, Equinox is a little weak here because even with the gold movement that we've seen, where we had a monthly close recently, that's the highest in history. Equinox has not really shared in that move as much as I'd like to see. And it's about ready to take out a previous low in early of December. And when you look at the relative strength indicator and MACD, which are both indicators of momentum, it looks like we're going to be challenging that lower area in December. And I wouldn't be surprised if we take that out and head toward that. We take that Bollinger Band even lower, and we might over time, especially with a weakening of the generalized stock market, which I have a feeling we're about to see, we could go back and challenge that 4 area ultimately on the daily.
Doc, what about this ADX here too? I've noticed this spiking red bar, which is kind of the weakness indicator here. It lines up, I guess, with your assessment of some of these momentum indicators that are breaking down below these December levels. price hasn't broken down for there. So what would a lower price target be on this daily chart?
I think our ultimate one would be if we have a similar situation with that ADX line as we saw back in October of this year. If you look back where it spiked and then it hung around up at the top, we're going to see 4 for sure. But if we just move up and then we head back down with the green bullish line on the ADX, then we're going to stabilize around this 4.4 area. So that's what you're going to have to look for, is if the red line stays kind of elevated like it was in October, then we're certainly looking at for a price of $4 again.
Okay, Doc, what about the weekly chart, which I'm just pulling up here? This is going to show us, again, this range-bound nature for almost the whole year, but you do need to consider the stock broke down in 2022.
Yeah, and once again, what you have to look at is that green Bollinger Band, where there's a support, and guess where that is? Right at 4 again, where we've seen it back in October. And I think we're going to probably reach that with time. I think with what's showing on that weekly chart and the daily chart, the odds are pretty good that we're going to see it. Now, when you look at the ADX on the weekly chart, the red bearish line is going to continue up for probably another week to compromise that green bullish line. And if it breaks up higher and continues to climb a little bit, then we're in the possibility that we actually could break even lower. But at this time, it looks like we're going to get some support at the price of about 4 or the low 4s.
Okay, so look at that $4 range. Anything on this monthly chart, or should we move on here?
The monthly chart, what's very interesting on the monthly chart, if you look at the Bollinger Bands, they're starting to move up on the lower part, and the higher Bollinger Band is moving down. So we're going to get into a pinch situation in the next couple of months where you're going to really have some really narrow Bollinger Bands like you had back in 2018 and 19. And so we should get support around the level of 4 yet, because we're moving up toward that on the lower Bollinger Band on the monthly chart as well. So that's encouraging. But then we could develop a trading range like we did back in 2019 to 2000, or the latter part of 2018 and early 2019. We could be in that for a while this year, depending on what happens as far as what the Federal Reserve does, in my opinion.
All right, Chad, let's move on to SilverCrest Metals, traded on the NYSE under the symbol SILV. Take us through some of the fundamentals of this company, which we have featured on the show a number of times.
Yeah, Corey, I really like SilverCrest Metals as a both offensive and defensive play in the silver equity space. They have moved from being an explorer to a developer to now a producer as of 2022. They actually finished their construction of the Las Chispas mine in May of 2022, went into commercial production in November of 2022, and then over the last year have proven that they're competent operators, just like they were when they brought Santa Elena in production in SilverCrest 1.0. So this is the second time this management team has done it again. And in 7 months after going into commercial production, they paid off all their debt. So they're now debt-free. I really like that. As far as their cost, they're a very low-cost silver producer. Their all-in sustaining cost is in a range of, let's say, $12.75 to $13.75, and they see that being very consistent over the next few years. And that's after factoring in all the inflation we've seen to all the producers the last couple of years. So very fat margins here with silver in the mid-20s. They plan on producing 10 million silver equivalent ounces per year, and then being able to potentially ramp that up through exploration. And what I also like about them is they're just prudent capital management company. They are buying back some of their shares. In August of last year, they announced they were going to do a share buyback policy. They're also holding silver on their balance sheet as a way to give silver investors more exposure to the metal they want and possibly price appreciation. So instead of holding cash on their balance sheet, they are holding cash, but they're also holding some actual silver on their balance sheet. I think that's unique in the marketplace. So I think they're set up to weather any lower prices in silver and prosper in any higher prices in silver.
Yeah, a recent call that I just had with Chris Ritchie over at SilverCrest, he outlined the balance of the company really entering this year with around $100 million balance between cash and gold and silver on the balance sheet. And we talked a lot about the potential of maybe an acquisition this year, how the company is going to grow. Doc, moving over to the charts, I have the daily chart pulled up here. What are you seeing in SilverCrest after, well, the company did get beat up down in kind of the tail end of summer at the back end of a technical report, but has recovered nicely just in the last couple months?
This chart, Corey and Shad, really looks strong. I love the pricing on it right now. We're going to have a little bit of pressure on the pricing, I believe, because when you look at the MACD, the 12-day is leading the 26-day moving average down toward neutral, which is zero. The other thing is ADX is also, if you look at the red bearish line, it's compromising the green bullish line, so it should break up above it in the next few days. And so I think you're going to have pricing under pressure, but also the slow stochastics will probably head down to 20. But here's the key. If even if the red bearish line compromises the green bearish line, if it does what it did in September and October, you're not going to see much more movement down. But if it does what it did back in August, that red bearish ADX strength line, then you're going to see more pressure on pricing. But I have a feeling that we won't see that, and we're going to move down, and we're going to get some support in the 200-month moving average, I feel, and in some of those other moving averages. So right now, the daily chart looks pretty good, except for we're going to have a little pressure on pricing.
Okay, so it does sound like watch those moving averages that all seem to be corresponding to right in around that $6 range, moving all a little bit higher to catch up to price. Let's move over to the weekly chart then. In terms of weekly, we see how much higher the stock was back in early 2022. But again, it's come off that bottom from earlier last year. What are you looking for in this chart?
Yeah, and this chart too, weekly, shows that there's going to be a little pressure for a while. It looks like we probably peaked on the MACD, and there's a fair distance between the 12-week and the 26-week moving average. And when you see that, when it reverses, you can get some pretty strong price movement down for a very short time. And also the ADX is also trending up the red line, and with the green bullish line trending down. And I think they're going to pose, they're going to come in opposition. But I don't see after that necessarily there's going to be a lot more movement down. We may get down to the $5.5 to $6 range according to the weekly chart, but the monthly chart will tell us even more.
Let's move on to that monthly chart then. And one thing I would like you to touch on too is the potential of, even after this weakness, what SilverCrest could move to price-wise, and if it's even possible they do get back to that all-time high back in the very beginning of 2021.
Yeah, we could move back down toward 5 in this area. I think that's going to be a good place to get some major support. The RSI relative strength indicators in the MACD look good. They don't look like they're going to be under any major pressure anytime soon, and that they're going to tend to trade sideways, probably to gently up. In fact, the stochastics on the monthly chart shows that we might have to get up to 80 before we see any major pressure on this stock. But right now, it looks like it's finding a new trading range for itself. And this stock actually looks pretty strong to me for the long term. And is what Shad said for the future is correct for the stock. We're in close to 4 or 5, or I would say actually around 5 for a long-term investor, for myself, and I'm not encouraging anybody else, but I would strongly look at purchasing some of this stock for myself, but I'm not recommending it. I'm just doing it based on my personal feeling.
Doc, one more quick question. Something that stands out to me here is that the RSI pretty much flat right at that neutral level. The MACD pretty much flat just below zero. And the ADX and the strong ADX and the weak ADX lines all pretty much flat in around this 20 level. But slow stochastics are higher as the Bollinger bandwidth is down, is narrow, almost as narrow as we've seen it in history. What do you take away from that, where momentum's showing us not a whole lot, but slow stochastics are moving much higher?
Well, I would say that technically there's not a lot of threats to this company on the downside based on all of those. And that we're going to form, once again, the Bollinger Bands are going to come together on this thing. And it's going to probably trade in a range for a while until we get some catalyst for this market and generally where it breaks out to the upside. And then I think you see it move toward those all-time highs again.
All right, Chad, let's move over to the energy sector with Baytex Energy, traded on the NYSE under the symbol BTE.
Okay, Corey. Yeah, I like looking at the oil and nat gas sector right now because it kind of got beat up in 2023, and I anticipated having a better year in 2024. And what I like about Baytex is it's one of the best-in-class mid-tier producers, in my opinion. They have a nice mix of both the light oil and the heavy oil in Canada, and they just did an acquisition in June of 2023, so just last summer, of Ranger Oil Corp, and they picked up a big position in the Eagle Ford Basin in Texas, and that is also in the light oil. So they've got a nice exposure to the oil sector, both in the U.S. and Canada, so it's domestic based. They've got a nice production profile. They did about 153,000 barrels of equivalent energy per day last year, and they anticipate that ramping up. And really, over the next 5 years, this thing's a money machine. It's going to be producing free cash flows for the next 5 years that grow at a big percentage each year. So I'm liking the growth aspect for Baytex. And the other thing that they are is very friendly to shareholders. They return about 50% of their free cash flow to shareholders in the terms of share buybacks, dividends, and they're continuing to pay down debt. They've actually got a pretty strong balance sheet, like a lot of the energy companies now. And one other thing I'll throw in there that caught my attention from their corporate presentation just in the last couple months is for this year, 2024, they plan on a development budget of $1.2 to $1.3 billion. So they're going all in on drilling new wells, bringing some new wells online. So I see Baytex as a great growth-oriented oil and nat gas producer in Canada and the U.S.
All right, Doc, let's look at the chart here. I pulled up the daily chart and I extended it to the full year. So we get the full year picture of what happened with Baytex this year. What's catching your eye for this daily chart?
I'd just like to say before I say anything about that, I've owned Baytex for a long time and also Equinox out of these three stocks that we're talking about so far. But anyway, I love the stock pattern on this. We hit a real low in December and we bounced up, and the MACD is still trending toward the zero, which is encouraging. And the ADX, both red and green, are trending downward, which I think they'll continue to do together. So that tells me that there's not going to be a lot of more price pressure on this stock. And also it had a bottom back in June of this year of 286. So, and we got down to 301. So we're double bottoming on this daily chart, and it'll be interesting what the weekly and monthly shows to get an even better perspective of the stock. But it looks okay. It looks like it's had its worst move right now.
So, Doc, what about these moving averages and how steeply dipping some of the longer term, or actually most of these moving averages are?
Yeah, and that doesn't concern me because I think that the stock has moved down with those, or actually led them down. And I think that when they compromise pricing, I don't think in this instance it'll push the stock much further down. But once again, the weekly will tell me a lot more when we look at it.
Let's move to the weekly chart. Then I'll extend this chart to fill the full chart so we get a multi-year view here. Doc, in terms of the weekly chart, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing a MACD that is still going to have a little pressure on it, maybe for another week or two. And I wouldn't be surprised if we challenge that 3 level again. And what I really like about this is what ADX is showing right now with the difference between the red bearish line and the green bearish line, which when that green turns up, we're going to finally see probably a bottom in this stock for a while. And so it looks like we're at the bottom range of a trading range. Plus, we've got a 200-month moving average that it looks like it's going to be very supportive for this stock. So if I was personally looking at buying this, and I'm not recommending it to people, I'm just saying that I'd probably look at purchasing it again at $3 a share, right in that area.
Okay, looking at that bottom that was in December. Let's move on to the monthly chart and see if anything changes when we look at that longer term chart here. Look, we all know how beat up these stocks were in the time period kind of before, I guess, well, really right here is when they started bouncing. Baytex really went from, looks like a low 29 cents all the way up to $7. What are you seeing in the monthly chart here, Doc?
I love monthly charts and being an investor, not a trader. I love taking positions when a price hits the lower Bollinger Band because often you're seeing a potential low. But if you don't, if you're going to move down further, it's going to be really arduous. It's not like it's going to drop right out of bed even lower. So it gives you time to get out if you think that it's going to go lower. So it looks like we may have a little pressure yet down to $3, maybe even $2.50. But on the monthly chart, the MACD, the 12-month is leading the 26-month down, but it's a gentle move down. So I think it's coming to the point where it's going to plane out, and we're going to move sideways for a while, but not with a lot more downward pressure on this stock.
Okay. Shad, let's move over to the last stock, Energy Fuels, moving into the uranium sector and looking, well, we're going to look at the daily chart here with Doc, but first and foremost, fundamentals for Energy Fuels, please.
Yeah, Corey, I thought we should include a uranium stock just because uranium had a big rip as a sector last year. And in the United States, Energy Fuels, traded on the ticker UUUU, is probably the leader in the pack. It's the only company that has actually been in production and was in production before the uranium market went through its big correction. So they have that experience. They currently are still producing for both hard rock and in situ mining, which is basically the fluid injection in the ground. It's a lower cost of mining, less disturbance. And over the last decade, Energy Fuels really cannibalized and capitalized on the sector pullback by buying a lot of the smaller companies and taking over a lot of prior flagships and putting it all under one umbrella. And in addition to the uranium space, which has been very hot, Energy Fuels has two other kickers. It can also produce vanadium, which is used in some of the vanadium flow batteries they're developing, as well as in medical applications. There's not a lot of vanadium producers out there, so that's another feather in their cap. And they're able to produce rare earths. And we hear all the time about rare earths and how China dominates the space. But Energy Fuels is one of the only companies I know of outside of Linus that operates in Australia that's outside of China producing rare earths. They're doing it from monazite. So that's another value kicker. And they've teamed up with Neo Performance Materials to process some of these old tailings that companies have that have radioactive elements in them, and they can't produce the rare earth elements out of them unless they are a uranium producer like Energy Fuels. So that's what I like about the company. They have the White Mesa Mill in Utah that is producing. They have the Nichols Ranch ISR that's on standby. And then they have two other projects slated to come into production in 2024, Pinion and LaSalle. And they've also started signing some contracts with utility companies, and they're on the books for over the next 8 years doing about 3 million to 3.8 million pounds of U3O8 per year on this contract. So the contracting cycle's kicked off. So I see uranium as a good sector to be in, and I see Energy Fuels as a safe company to be in the space, domestic in the United States.
All right, Doc, let's take a look at this daily chart. I'm going to extend it out to 1 year here. But the first comment I'd like from you is that December low. It looks like, well, the company is testing that out. The stock is testing that out right now. What do you see within this 1 year daily chart of Energy Fuels?
What I see is a stock under pressure right now. In fact, if we close at where we're at right now, today we're going to have a new closing, in December, or I mean over the close in December that was
I'll
a
pull
little
up that
higher
chart for you. Here you go. Now everyone can see that a bit clearer. That's that
Yeah,
low back in December.
Yeah, and if we take that out, and if we take out the 200-day moving average, the odds are pretty good that we're going to move a little bit lower. In fact, if you look at the ADX, that's trending up. That line's trending up, and if that continues to trend up, we're going lower for sure. Then the 12-month is leading the 26-month, or the 12-day is leading the 26-day moving average is down, and if that continues down in the direction it is with that kind of momentum, we're going to take out the 200-day. And I would not see that as a good sign, but the weekly should tell us even more.
Yeah, let's move on to the weekly because that daily chart does look a little bit weaker. But if we move over to the weekly, the stock has done fairly well when you consider where it was. But let's take a look at this weekly chart.
What's negative about the weekly chart, and that may tell you what's going to happen with daily. The positive, we're right at the lower Bollinger Band. We're right at it, and it will want to hold there. But I'm concerned because your strength indicator or your momentum indicators, both the RSI and the MACD, are trending down toward 30, and the RSI and 0 or neutral on the MACD, where the 12 weekly is moving the 26 week, and I think that's going to continue. And then the question is if it goes into negative territory and wants to challenge that one that was lower back in April. And if it does that, it's very possible that we may move down into the $6 range on this stock.
$6 though, that's kind of in the middle of where it has traded for almost 2 years now, though. Hey, Doc?
Correct. And so the next couple of weeks will tell the story on this stock, frankly.
Okay, quick comment on the monthly chart. Does the monthly change any of your assessment?
Yeah, and the monthly tells me that what's good about the monthly chart is the ADX, the green line, is still above the red. And if it stays and just moves down a little bit with the red moving up toward the green, we could see that $6 figure. It looks like this stock wants to maintain a trading range for a while, and that's what we're seeing. So I think the pressure on this stock is to the downside in the near term to intermediate term, but it'll probably, right now, it doesn't look negative as far as breaking lower out of that trading range.
Okay, I think that covers it. Equinox Gold, SilverCrest Metals, Baytex Energy, and Energy Fuels. We hope you all have enjoyed another segment of Shad and Doc Talk Stocks. We're going to try to do these on a more regular basis, so please keep in touch with us and let us know any stocks you want us to touch base on. Again, this is not investment advice, just a couple guys talking stocks. Doc, Shad, thank you very much for all of your insights.